Thank you very much, Dr. Cohen. And thank you, Jerry, very much for your introduction and this evening's opportunity. I think it's this is an East Asian institute, and the place where we're talking about is really South Asia now, I suppose, geographically speaking. But I think it's very... May I sit down?
Yeah, please.
Now, I think it's rather seldom that you have a conference under the title of Japan and the United States in Afghanistan. You usually talk about U.S.-Japan relations all the time. But let's tonight change the focus on what we're doing together, separately, jointly, and over a very, very difficult situation that we're all trying to overcome and improve and help improve. And I think this the purpose of this lecture is to really know what Japan has been doing, wants to do, plans to do, a lot on its own, but a lot with the United States. And I'm very happy to have Professor Nadiri on my side, because we've worked together in many things. Now, I'd just like to make it very clear that Japan had a very old relationship with Afghanistan. Next year, we will observe the 80th anniversary since the beginning of diplomatic relations with Afghanistan and Japan. And this treaty of friendship was signed and exchanged between Marshal Shah Wali Khan, the Afghanistan envoy, and Mr. Tsuneo Matsudaira, the Japanese ambassador, in London. This was 2010. And friendly relations between Afghanistan and Japan started in the 1930s. Diplomatic missions were exchanged. Some 20 or 30 Japanese were living in Afghanistan for cultural and educational exchanges. It's a long history that we've had. And Afghan people found similar cultures between Afghanistan and Japan in many ways. There were mutual visits at the imperial level. Their Majesties, King Zahir Shah and Queen Humaira, paid an official visit for 1 week, state visit to Japan, and received by their Majesties Emperor Hirohito and Empress Sadako. And in 1970, the current Emperor and Empress, who were Crown Prince and Princess, visited Afghanistan and so on. So I just want to make very clear that there's old relations existed. It's not just recent problems that you hear all about. And I think this, the Development Corporation, which I head the organization that is responsible for development assistance, this started already in the 1960s. And between 1960s and 70s, water supply in Kandahar, the capital, Herat, Mazar Sharif, Jalalabad, these things happened in the 1960s. And also, there was a tuberculosis institute that was set up in Kabul in 1977. It is functioning today, too. And then Afghan National TV in Kabul was opened in 1977 by NHK. And so this kind of thing has been there for a long time. And continued in many ways during the turbulent decades in Afghanistan. The communists took over in 1978, Soviet invasion followed, US intervention followed, and then Soviet withdrawal, and then Afghanistan sort of became a forgotten country in international politics. It was in the towards the end of the 1990s that UN Special Envoy Mr. Brahimi went there and tried to negotiate some kind of a political arrangement, which was really in a very complicated, rather turbulent Afghanistan. And I just wanted to make a few points. Ever since then, what has been Japan's approach towards Afghanistan through this turbulent decades? I think there was always some idea that Japan presents some kind of a venue for peace, bringing various different groups together and trying something like a peace negotiation. And this was also holding a conference, was already in the idea of the Japanese diplomatic corps in those days. And then also, Japan was interested in post-conflict, what would call social and economic reconstruction efforts ever since then. And in this sense, after the refugees started to flood the region, this is when I got involved, because there were some 6 million refugees in Pakistan and in Iran. And as a High Commissioner for Refugees, this was my biggest challenge and the biggest failure. I could not solve the refugee issue while I was High Commissioner. The much more active attention and interest in doing something about Afghanistan starts, maybe Professor Nadiri might have, 9/11. I was here in New York, and the 9/11 was a shock. And then suddenly, every day on American television, you would see a map of Afghanistan, because nobody knew where it was among those who were looking at on television those days. And the terrorist attack in 2001, September 11th, and followed by aerial bombing by the United States. And then finally, all sorts of diplomatic negotiations. There was a Bonn agreement in 2001 about how to settle the political, you would say, government arrangement, so on. And in January 2002, Japan convened the first international conference on reconstruction assistance to Afghanistan. This was known as a Tokyo conference. But I just said the past because the idea of somehow bringing the various conflicting parties together was always there. And what Japan had been trying to do during the refugee outflow days was to somehow help return the refugees back to Afghanistan. There was a fund set up in the United Nations to assist this return, and the something like what they called the ASRA program. This was to have a kind of a model reintegration program inside Afghanistan to help take some refugees back. I wouldn't say that this was a major success, but the pattern was there. And it is along this line that I think a lot of the post-2002 Japanese efforts in Afghanistan has followed. This was in terms of the areas that we have focused on, it was really focused a lot on rural development, agriculture and rural development, because the government, both at the central and local level, were not strong. And Japan tried to set up agriculture, rural development projects in order to reach the people as widely as possible. And JICA itself was in Afghanistan and tried to set up some rural development projects, clustering several communities. And this became a very clear Afghan program, national solidarity program, which I think is one of the good programs still continuing. Not that it has been able to successfully rule the whole country, but the clusters have had the beginning already 7 or 8 years ago. So the Afghanistan is a rural country, and agriculture is the main area of concentration to provide livelihood to the people. I would say 80% of the Afghan people live in rural areas. And 2/3 of Afghan labor opportunities lies in this sector of rural development. While donors have been supporting wheat production mostly as the main staple food, Japan has been concentrating a lot on rice production, which is the second staple crop. And this particular rice production had been neglected. So, but JICA has set up an agriculture research institute in Jalalabad and has been really trying very hard to bring rice production into a mainstream agricultural production. But this is more or less, I just try to rush through the past. What we have been doing, and JICA in Japan has been doing, especially through this year, is to try to somehow expand the coverage of rural development. And from Jalalabad to the northeastern region, because the northeastern region is the food basket in the country with plenty of water resources. It's a poppy-free region, which should be sustained as a poppy-free region. Geopolitically, it is important, and it was facing a little bit more and more a worsening security situation. That was the plan that JICA had very much in consultation with the Afghan government trying to implement, spread the rural development project through the north. Another project which I would like to emphasize very much is the Kabul Metropolitan Area Development Project. And Professor Nadiri is really the mainstay of this Kabul Metropolitan Area Development Project. I think there is a very strong desire to realize new city development. JICA has had experience in metropolitan planning and development. Right now, Mongolian capital Ulaanbaatar is also under a huge metropolitan development program. But there are several reasons why I'd like to emphasize the Kabul Metropolitan Area Development. It is because I believe very strongly in the importance of this plan, but there's a problem of rapidly increasing population. I think it must be now more than 4 million people. 4.5 million in Kabul. There is deteriorating environment. Water resources are scarce, so we have to supply water to Kabul, but also water management is very important. And so there is a business plan for the new city development to rehabilitate the older Kabul to begin with. But now there is a creation, additional new Kabul metropolitan area to the north. And this altogether, I'm sure, with all good luck, it might take 10 years or so to really complete it. But the job opportunities that are created by having this Metropolitan Kabul Development Project is a very, very important one that we should not disregard. And also the overall importance of the symbol of unity and integration of the Afghan people in Afghanistan as a state is very much depends on having a major metropolitan area construction. We have to do, already studies have been done to construction of basic infrastructure. And this is especially it is water supply, road construction, and some forestry attempts. Also, to bring this big infrastructure development, it requires a lot of people, labor, it requires engineering and investment. And it is important, and I'm sure there are many Afghans overseas too, who would like to come and invest in Afghanistan. And these are the Metropolitan Plan, and I think Professor Nadiri will speak more about this. It's a very major program that we are supporting, Japan is supporting. So it's extending agriculture and developing this metropolitan area of Kabul. These are the major, large-scale development work that Japan has been carrying on. But in the meantime, we're following up on the tuberculosis experiment. There's a lot of schools that we built already. By the beginning of this year, Japan had built some 500 schools throughout Afghanistan. And I wanted to, we were just talking about this episode, lots of schools, lots of teacher trainings, lots of health clinics. These things were one of the major social and economic development plans that we have pursued. And I was just reminded of this story about that the New York Times reported rather recently when a girls' school was burned and students were thrown acid and so on, that this was a terrible, terrible incident. The story wanted to emphasize that these girls went back to school, even with this horrible horrible challenge that they were faced. And in a very small line, it said that this school was built by Japan. And I don't think most people in America knew that Japan built schools in Afghanistan, did anything in Japan. But these are the things that have been going on, and we would really like to continue. Another story that I'd like to bring up is the question of the television station. In 1977 or 8, the Afghan National TV station was set up in Kabul by NHK auspices. And when I visited Kabul in 2002 January, that is in preparation of the Tokyo conference, we visited this television station. It was quite old, I must say. It was built 20 years before. But everything was so nicely kept, I was very touched. And I was told that during the Taliban days, music was not allowed. So all these equipment had been hidden. And if you hide all the television equipment, it goes out of use. So the people who were running it would bring out these equipment, and run the electricity in order to keep them moving, but hid them all the time that the Taliban came. It's a very moving story. And when the first development meeting took place in Tokyo in 2002, President Karzai went to NHK and actually met the engineers who had been so dedicated in setting up this television station. I visited this station again, was it last year or the year before last I went, and I was really amazed how modernized it is. It's a first-class modern television station. We felt that television was important because it is one way of educating people widely, bringing information to the country, and so on. So this very, very important television station was also a Japanese contribution that I'd like to inform you. Of course, things are not smooth, nor the country is in total peace or security. Not of that, because the Taliban, the United States, after 9/11, the Al-Qaeda bases were brought. I would say were bombed. And a lot of the Al-Qaeda forces moved out of Afghanistan to the tribal areas in Pakistan. This tribal area is a very geographically difficult and very difficult to control. And this is where a lot of the Al-Qaeda and the Taliban forces are headquartered. And a lot of people all of the activities from the region spread both ways, inside Pakistan, but also inside Afghanistan. And this is where the military aspect must not be disregarded. And so there is, on the one hand, the United States, the NATO forces trying to deal with this insurgency and spread of terrorist efforts through military means, while a lot of efforts are made in order to bring the socioeconomic conditions under control. They are related. At the same time, it is too simplistic to say, if you control it militarily, everything will be all right. It is also too simplistic to say that economic and social conditions are such can contain the military or insurgent activities. They are related, but how to balance the two is probably the biggest challenge that both the United States and Japan has, and many other countries has, over the situation in Afghanistan. And so we have to move this way, in both ways. Japan has concentrated in various peace negotiations, peace building, economic and social aspects. The Obama administration has made it very clear that the policy that they have come up with to say that a country should contribute in the best way that they can contribute, which is a very subtle way, but a very understanding way to make known that Japan has a very major role to play, and that particular role has been recognized. And those are the things that I wanted to bring out as a starter. The education part, I talked about 500 schools. But now, I would say a lot of the roads have been improved. More than 12,000 miles of all-weather roads are there now. 80% of the people do have access to some kind of health, and 6 million children are enrolled in the schools, and nearly 35% of them are girls. So, compared to what it was several years ago, there is a lot of improvement. And I think that is something that I'd like to bring on, because we only read about the bad things, the dangerous things, the fighting part. But both have to move in parallel or in close conjunction. And I would hope that the international community will remain committed for a long-run support to Afghanistan. So I don't want Afghanistan to be, again, a forgotten country. So with that, maybe I should turn to Professor Nadiri.
Thank you. Sadako, while Professor Nadiri walks over to the podium, let me just ask you one question. Well, it's actually two questions, factual questions. One, how many people do you have, JICA, have in Afghanistan on the ground? And second, do you see any change in the policies of the Japanese government towards Afghanistan with the new Hatayama administration having come in?
Well, the first thing, in JICA has right now about 40 staff, plus various specialists and so on. We would like to maintain about 70 staff in, it's not just Kabul, but Bamiyan, Jalalabad, and Kandahar. We've had to virtually close our office. But with that, a number of Japanese staff and JICA staff and specialists, I think we can do a reasonably good job. Of course, there are many, many Afghans whom are collaborators. At the same time, the NGOs were there in large numbers in the early, in the 1990s for the refugee camps in Pakistan and in Iran. But now the NGOs have to do a remote control kind of a work, and they're not there either. So it is the security of the staff is a very major challenge. We do have them trained for training for this dangerous mission place. We try to make sure that they take enough holidays. Rest is very important for security purposes. And we would like to go back to our 70 to 100 staff situation in order to cover the rural development and the metropolitan area development and many others. The current, the new Mr. Hatayama's cabinet has made it very clear that Afghanistan is a priority area of their attention. And they have, this is something I've just read in the paper, but have put up a package of assistance of something about $5 billion the next for 5 years. And they are very, very much committed to strengthen our work in Afghanistan. Mr. Ogata, one of the very early visits, he made a one-day visit. We work with several of the various ministries. Mr. President Karzai has been to Japan several times, and there is that we have to strengthen their governing institutions as well. And this kind of policy, I think the Hatayama cabinet is very strongly committed to carry on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is really a great pleasure to be here with Mrs. Ogata to present some views of Afghanistan to you, and also I'm very grateful because this is the university that gave me tenure, so consequently I could think about whatever I wanted to think, as it were. So for me it's almost a homecoming. What I thought that I could contribute to you is basically some of the attitudes of the Afghan people, not necessarily Afghan government, and what really lies behind their thinking. And as the proverb goes, a man's expectation is his reality. The Afghan population as a whole thinks that they are in joint friendship for the past 30 years with the United States. And why do they think so is the following, that in the basically early 1980s, 79, there was a communist revolution in Afghanistan promoted by the Soviet Union, and then later on the invasion of Afghanistan that followed by the Soviet forces. And in this process, the key issue as they explain it to you, I'm talking about some of the people who are knowledgeable about this, is that the United States under the Brzezinski doctrine, that when I was here, he was here too, exploring the underbelly of the Soviet Union to see whether they can weaken that state and consequently have some other advantages which would occur later on in Eastern Europe come about. So there's a class of people that in Afghanistan thinks that this was initiated or at least perceived by the Soviets, and consequently the invasion took place. So the United States, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia countered this aggression by a state, by non-state actors. They collected a whole bunch of Afghans and they gave them their weapons and money and the like of it. So they went after the Russians, and the process, the Afghans lost about 1.5 to 2 million people. And they also received this notion that they were fighting with the United States, a sort of state that was suppressing freedom and the like of it. This coincided with the Afghan sense of independence. So they went after that. Then the Afghan found out that after the last truck of the Soviets had not left the Afghanistan, that the United States abandoned Afghanistan. And since they were fighting the Russians with a bunch of people who were not part of an army, the U.S. withdrawal simply left Afghanistan naked to the civil war that occurred. So out of that civil war, another million or so was killed. The refugees numbers were Mrs. Ogata mentioned already, that are accentuated, and there was no effort was made to put a structure on the ground that at least the Afghans could speak to each other. They just sort of free for all. Then they promoted the U.S., this is the Afghan talking, promoted basically the rise of the Taliban. They didn't say anything to the Pakistan while it did this thing. And so the Afghan grievance is the following, that we were subjected to a theocratic Nazism of a kind that the world hasn't seen. For years and years, nobody came to help us in that period. Maybe if they did, was very marginal. Then the second major episode that this does not appear at the governmental levels and so forth, is the Afghans talking about when they talk about this, is that 9/11 occurred with all the things that everybody know, and the American State Department as well as the President chose to fight the Afghan problem in a different way than the Russians. In fact, one of the prides of President Bush was that he was not doing what the Russians had did, because they will not be introducing American soldiers to fight. So they hired themselves the Northern Alliance, which is another group of Afghans in the north, they are of a different tribal structure and so forth. to go after the Taliban, which are mainly Pashtun, come from the Pashtun groups, and that destabilized the ethnic relationship between in Afghanistan. In fact, part of the fact that many people, they don't talk about Taliban is basically they are not certain that the people who came to power after the American invasion are really justified to govern. This is a societal problem, takes a long time. I'm not talking about justifications of the kind. And so consequently, this second part also led to a lot of bloodshed and the rise of the so-called the warlords. These warlords were financed by the United States, and they let go at it. These people had, in fact, President Bush is supposed to have been joking, saying that for $70 million to win a war, minus the whatever the cost of the bombs were, really was a good deal. But it was, the Afghans feel that it was their blood on the ground. So they expect the US and the other ones to really face up to this issue. It is not a kind of a kindness to be in Afghanistan. They do expect this. And in fact, I was telling Professor Sachs about I got a call from a driver of mine from Afghanistan that he has been watching the episodes of the Berlin Wall. And he was a former combatant against the Russians and so forth, so on. And he asked me, was there an Afghan represented there? I said, no, that I know of. Were you invited? I said, no, nobody invited me. And he said, we fought that one we gave millions of people to really weaken the Soviet Union. We stopped the Red Army, you know, and we suffered. Now, nobody says that we have anything to do with the wall in Berlin. In fact, he said that he didn't quite know how to pronounce the name of the leader of the Polish Waleska. That he said he couldn't have had his country basically be freed and allowed to have a demonstration if the inside of Russia was not shaken up by their own intervention in Afghanistan and being the fact that they stopped them. So anyway, these are the expectations. So the expectation of the Afghans is that America has an obligation to help us, as we had an obligation. So this may be a fancy talk, maybe they may not, but this is very critical for the United States if it wants to make any progress. You have to talk to the people because that's what they expect. And this idea of, well, let's go back, let's get out and so forth, so on, that Mr. Obama is saying, makes him extremely nervous. And they will say, this is the third time. And then when the American government accuses Karzai that he's not reliable, do we have a government and so forth, the answer that from the Afghan is that do we have a reliable nation in form of a United States that will stick with us? Because they have abandoned us repeatedly. So this does not come out, so this is the sort of expectation that hangs around there and so forth. Do whatever you like to do with it. Secondly, what I want to tell you that Japan has been exemplary in terms of helping us, in terms of things which really matters. The case of Afghanistan is a case of extraordinary poverty. In the 30 years, 25, 30 years, a simple calculation that was made by some people for me in Afghanistan indicates that close to $1 trillion were lost by the Afghans from between 1979 to 2001. this is the loss in terms of GDP, not counting the number of people got killed, not the loss of capital stock of the country, and so forth, so on. $1 trillion to a small, poor country like that is huge. And that meant immiseration of the population. What was it that Afghanistan didn't lose? All its institutions went away. All its youth for a generation didn't get any education, and so forth. So the immiseration of the Afghan people have been really a central issue. And I think the insecurity and the lawlessness and the rule of law and the like, these are issues of importance, but these are symptoms of this poverty. You cannot have rule of law when people do not have anything to eat or do not have what they think they have. So with this collection of destroyed institutions and rise of the warlords and so forth, Afghanistan is in a state of disequilibria of a very fundamental way. But nonetheless, a great deal has been accomplished. For example, at the time of the Taliban, when they were overthrown, Afghanistan had only 125 miles of paved road remaining. Now it's over 5,000 miles have been built. 6.5 million kids are in school, and we are next year expecting in Afghanistan to be the graduates of high school and universities will reach about 200 to 300,000 that's coming out with no prospect for work, which is an issue of itself. 80% of the population of Afghanistan now has some contact with health institutions of various kinds. Afghanistan now has the most sort of wildest media you can think of, with rumors and with everything else and so forth, so on. This was a country that had only one god, one king, one TV station, and one or two newspapers. We were all for one. Now there are 300 papers. Every day they are talking about something. There are 14 television stations. And then you have a great deal of people getting into commerce and the like of it. So many good things are happening, but compared to the destruction that exists here, the challenges are incredible. So the key factor is that the paradigm of security, rule of law, and economic and development has been fully appreciated by the international community and the Afghan government. In fact, I had the privilege of putting together a document which is called the Afghan National Development Strategy, which explains how to get things from here to there, and then so the structure is there, and their interdependence of these things are very, very essential to think about. So now, where is the problem? The problem is first in the NATO approach to things. This may be considered an alliance of the most powerful states in the world, but it is not an alliance. They quarrel with each other. They have caveats of various kinds. I will not send my police here, and I will not send my army there, and so forth, so on. So then there's a whole game going on between these generals of various types, and they have different views. So the second thing is that and the most important and pernicious of it all is that the aid, and the United States is the biggest aid giver, is totally dysfunctional. It does not provide what people need, they won't even ask them. It is, some Afghans were telling me that they are all feeling like being invited at the Columbia Faculty Club, and there are about 200 cooks somewhere cooking something, and they are bringing it to you to eat. And you may not like any of them, or you may not need any of them, but they develop it in the Washington and so forth, so on. Here's my program for this and that sort of things. And the Afghans are not involved. In fact, the international community, Japan is excluded from all this thing, not because of my love of Japan, but there are people who, up to now, there is no statistics of how the money international community, and particularly the United States, spends in Afghanistan. There is no accountability whatsoever. You talk about corruption. Now, the claim of the Afghans is that the corruption lies in inside the international community. Why? Because, first of all, 50% of the money that is supposed to go to Afghanistan doesn't leave the states that are donating. It will not leave Washington. Where does it go? How does it go? It's a very long story. Second, of the 50% that goes, 75% of that is distributed directly by the director of aid of that country in Afghanistan. Now, did you know that in Afghanistan, the United States has 68,000 soldiers, but over 73,000 contractors? A small Afghan government, which is not more than 15, 20 people, and it is not what the concept you have here, that there's a government and so forth, so on. To control this, to attend to this is impossible. They don't know. They go to one ministry and shows him now $2 million. He will make sure that he gets the money, not to his buddy in the other ministry, and so forth. So it's a kind of a bazaar which puts a traditional Middle Eastern bazaar to shame. So, but it continues, and there is no accountability. Now, the issue is that they give these contracts to the very people that they complain that they are warlords. In fact, some of the funds go to the relatives of these warlords, and you think that somebody else not tax them on the background? This is prevalent. In fact, some of the problems exist in Afghanistan in such a way that the different countries which are working in different parts of the country, they want to keep their warlords happy because they don't want to go and fight with this guy. They give them contracts and so forth. But then you find this thing, well, there's this corruption and that corruption. Let's get Karzai, and I might as well run him out of the town and so forth, which is, I'm surprised, basically of the quality of the punditry and the press of this country. They should go and do some investigative journalism to find out what happens to the well-earned income that this country devotes for Afghanistan. Basically, both the U.S. government as well as Afghan government are the conduit to really get the savings of this country to invest it properly there so that we get peace and prosperity. The other one is that the state is underdeveloped in Afghanistan. And the reason is there are these issues that we all hear, that there has been 8 years of fighting in Afghanistan. How many of you heard this thing? Well, until 2007, there wasn't any. I was there, everybody else was there, and Mrs. Ogata perhaps came there. There wasn't any. And so it peaked in time 2007. And why? Because the U.S. left the job unfinished. It pushed the Taliban out of Afghanistan. They resided in Pakistan. And the Pakistanis had a very interesting view from the Afghan point of view, is that They say, well, it is our territory, don't even come close to it. But we will allow our people to go and invade the other country and kill the Americans. What kind of a logic is that? What kind of political apparatus we have in this country to protect the Americans? For 7.5 years, this game has been going on. In fact, I was in a meeting that we gave even the phone numbers of the leaders of the Taliban and their addresses to the Mr. Musharraf. And everybody else knows that as well. What do we do in this game? So until 2007, there was not any substantial investment in Afghanistan police. So you had this guy, Karzai, sitting over there and saying that I'm the government. And one time I joked with him that with all the ineffective police you have, you are lucky that you are considered the mayor of Kabul. He doesn't have the wherewithal to apply these things, to give the law, to be democratic, to be this, with what? So only in the past 2 years there is some possibility of recognition. And I consider that the Americans, no matter how many people will send, they cannot fight the Taliban. It takes the Afghans to go after the Taliban. And that's what they should do. With all the gears that the Americans are wearing, they cannot climb up that steep mountain. They don't know how. You know? And so consequently, they are sitting ducks in many ways. So it is the lack of understanding what happens there. So given all this, where do we go? My proposition is the following: that this should be considered, as the Afghan population considered, a joint project. And the issue is that the United States and the world cannot pull itself out of Afghanistan without being injurious to itself. This whole notion that there is a Pakistani Taliban and there is an Afghani Taliban and the Al-Qaeda is wearing red hats and you can go and get them and that's what we are. These are absurdities that comes up in the dreams of people. They fight a non-state, very guerrilla warfare. It is very, very loose and flexible, and don't forget that they can do a lot of harm. If you pull out, I personally say, maybe other people disagree here, that the Pakistan will be next. And the implication of that for India has to be thought through. Afghanistan is the hub, or was the hub, but it still is sort of the hub of the Al-Qaeda. And if I were American planners, I would think twice why Al-Qaeda is stationing itself in Somalia and Yemen, that you have heard lately. The target is Saudi Arabia. And whether they will accomplish or not, what would that be if about 5 or 6 pipelines are blown? The price of oil in this country will be 200 or above. And there could be a collapse of the kind that even the bankers couldn't do it. So it is a strategic investment. It is an important humanistic investment. And oftentimes I joke with my friends that Afghanistan is like the Apple's atom of the body. It's not much to look at. But boy, if you press it too hard, it can kill you. So it is very, very strategic to do this. Okay, now what should be done is to be a joint project, and the planning has to be done jointly. There has to be some agreement to basically effectuate what has been on the paper. This notion that you try to get a project go through the World Bank and 2 months later, 5 months later, 6 months later, they will agree or not agree and so forth on. This is not appropriate for this country and the United States, which has substantial interest in it. I would say that the international community and the Afghan government should set up a very critical joint operation in terms of aid and security and this and that sort of things. But the paradigm has to be such that the economic development and relief of the poverty will be the central issue of this exercise. The ignorance of the Taliban, that they just simply they were told that if you want to go to heaven, the shortest way to go there is through Kabul. Go and blow up something, and then you go to this thing. This ignorance is there and has to be resolved through economic and jobs. Afghanistan right now has 60% unemployment rate. 67% of this population of it is around 20 or 19 years old. They're coming. There is nothing for them to do. So this requires a long-term process, and I think that we should not get distracted by all these pundits that they write for every newspaper. That I used to have a lot of respect for them, but lately I've lost that. And so the U.S. must look after its own interest, and but at the same time lead the process. Part of this game should be the following. Afghanistan has been a place that everybody passes by to go to India, either enrich itself or do something else and so forth. It is located in a very strategic place. And Afghanistan, through the 2 or 3 centuries, has assumed a neutral position, but it has divided Asia from north to south and from east to west. Why not turn this thing to a facilitator state? That if you want to go from up and down and so forth, you want to invest in here, you're welcome to come and do that. This requires a long-term approachment. I'm not saying it's easy to do that, but a situation that we have in Afghanistan could approximate over 10, 15, 20 years some semi-similarity to Switzerland, which is geographically similar, in the similar situation that took a lot of wars to make that one. But why not we become more innovative and bring these people together so everyone in Afghanistan is there, it is hurting. Not only the population, everybody else. The Iranians, the Russians, a huge number of those people are becoming drug addicts. Great deal of instability in Pakistan. People are afraid in Tajikistan and many other places that this Taliban is going to spread to them and so forth. So why not take the positive aspect of it? So the issue would be this collaboration. The next 5 years has to be bold, has to be effective, and bring other people together. So I want to just say a few words on the joint project that we have with Mrs. Ogata, and this is my personal privilege to be working with her. And the idea is here that in the section that it is the largest project in Asia. It is working under a TVA kind of phenomena, so it's outside the government. It has an independent board, and all authorities are given to them. This extraordinary amount of land, which is about around 50 to 500,000 acres of land, is basically transferred now to this authority, so it has a zero price. And the planning has gone quite far. The Japanese government has been instrumental in terms of creating the master plan for the entire Kabul area. And now we are working on the problem of water and so forth, so on, and a whole group of people. And my interest in this thing is, with the help of the Japanese government, and Mrs. Ogata and some others, we would like to show that these Afghans are not just sort of simply gun-toting group and just sort of Islamic for this and that sort of things and totally ignorant. We have had a long history of contribution to the world, and we are not to be just considered as a bunch of lunatics. So that will be the challenge that within this big project we like to show it, to show that there is unity in Afghanistan, can be, there is talent in there, there is cooperation with the international community. So I will invite other countries to participate, take a portion of it. And the books of this organization will be subjected to audit by all international community and by some independent association or companies and publicize. So we will hopefully run it in terms of dignity, accountability, transparency, and it is an exciting exercise. And how many people, in fact, some of the law students from this distinguished university are about to go to Afghanistan to work on the laws that will govern this whole process and so forth, so on. So it can be exciting. It can be something else. But the Americans and the big pushers of these military policy and the like of it should really take a long term. And I think the cost of this exercise will be much less than the continuous process that we are at now. The Afghans will promise you. In fact, today there was an announcement by the Minister of Defense of Afghanistan then, that in around 5 years from now, the international community should withdraw their soldiers, but provided that you give them the right help to sustain the country. And so there is potential, and I hope that these ideas are taken somewhat seriously so that everybody could come up with something useful. And if that happens, this will be one of the most singular accomplishments in a Muslim country, which one way or the other, we Americans are in touch. We cannot separate ourselves again. And if we utilize the extraordinary accomplishment and contribution of the Muslim world prior to all their decline and so forth, so on, in the to the Western technology, science, and many others, they can rise again.
If you'd like to ask a question, raise your hand and tell me who you'd like to direct the question to, and identify yourself, and we'll go on from here. If you don't have a question, I got plenty. So, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Martin Rivlin. I'd like to ask both of you, do you see any possibility for the role of the UN to possibly replace NATO or to do something that might perhaps dramatically change the situation?
There are two kinds of military action in Afghanistan. One is the American-led coalition. The other one is the UN-led ISAF, which is now being handed over to the UN, to the NATO. And the reason why UN, the person who administered it, did a lot for this person, whom I know very well, Mr. Brahim, who was the UN representative, understood, and I would agree, that Afghanistan is just too big a place for UN peacekeeping forces to be effective. And I think that is a reality that is very hard to what shall I say, to tackle. UN does not have the kind of forces that can be very useful. And who can take care of the whole of Afghanistan? Maybe I'll ask Professor Nadiri to comment there.
The question was that, the role of the UN perhaps, and then how to solve the problems in Afghanistan. The expectation was that the UN will coordinate all the donors on behalf of the international community, and then they bring their program and the Afghans sit on the other side and they will exchange views. But that has not worked so far, because the language that in politics being talked, everybody loves coordination, but nobody wants to be coordinated. So they go around and do something else, because the only way you can coordinate is to either have a very sharp structure of budget control. People will put some money in there, and then they, according to what is more useful, as economists think about the rate of return, they will invest in whatever that they may be, and that will be clear. But that is not the capability that at least has shown there. And moreover, the UN tend to resolve issues on the first cut, and that is, let's talk, let us think about this and that sort of things. But the real politics, especially in a distraught country like that, runs, what have you done for me type of issue. You have to deliver something. And the desperate need for jobs, for harnessing their water so that they can go back to agriculture. And one thing which I wanted to mention more or less slightly, people talk about reconciliation in Afghanistan. Well, fine. Suppose I am a Talib and then tomorrow I come to Mr. Karzai or Mrs. Ogata and says, well, I'm tired of all this thing and I don't want to fight. What exactly Mrs. Ogata is going to give me? There's nothing to give. And if you just give them 4 ministries and the like of it, the next meeting of the cabinet will be that they will bring that saying, well, in Uruzgan, my people have petitioned that there should not be any schools for girls. Either the other members of the cabinet stand up and say, well, this is unconstitutional, we can't do it, or the international community would say something, or they accede to that. What's going to happen? These fantasy exercises that goes on is something that the youth, which you will inherit this world, should really think. How do you, in fact, the problem of Afghanistan is so different. You are moving a traditional society over centuries to become a 21st century citizenship. In fact, I've mentioned many times to Mr. Karzai saying, we have a 16th century country. A few people have gotten it by its lapels and want to come back to 21st century. And it is really insisting that I don't want to go there. Why should I go there? And the people who pay the way for all this thing, they want them to behave like a person in the 21st century. This is a formidable challenge. And it's not going to be easy unless you have a long-term plan. Sorry.
Sadako, do you want to comment? Or?
No, I agree with you there. The UN cannot run these things. Huh? UN can maybe back up in political negotiations, trying to get some security here and there. But it's a huge country. I mean, this is the reality. It's a huge country of a traditional sort, with a lot of tradition. But one problem that I would like to ask Professor Nadiri is, what is the role of the military? You can probably, with all these serious insurgencies in especially the last 2 years, there's some kind of law and order enforcement necessity. And the police, I mean, Japan has been helping the police, training, but also funding and so on, is probably not adequate. There's some role for some kind of an enforcement action. And that one, I understand all the criticism and problems that you have raised, but you cannot just have nothing either. And what kind of a military action is important where? But I mean, this is something that eventually you might be able to answer. Others are asking questions.
Dr. Nadiri, in his comments, said that the Afghan people believe the U.S. has an obligation to help. And President Obama right now is trying to decide what to do about increasing American forces. The main general has asked for 50,000. Their proposal for 20,000. It looks like it's an increase of some kind or another. And then you hear that that a lot of Afghans believe that the more American troops there are in the country, the more it looks like an occupation of Afghanistan. The question is, would you share with us your thoughts about whether, if you were going to had the chance to tell President Obama what you thought would be the appropriate response at this point in time on the military side, which is what I think Sadako was just asking about. On the military side, do you think that a major surge in American forces in Afghanistan is what's needed and would be effective?
Shall I answer? Yes. Well, both questions deals with the role of enforcement of police. You have to have something really, you can't just rely on the forces of tradition or something like that to solve your problem. It's a very important question. And the other one is the increase in number of the American soldiers in Afghanistan. My view is that basically it is what they do, both the soldiers that come from the United States and the police that is indigenous. In fact, surveys that so far I have seen, it is not true that the Afghans do not like the Americans to be there. The large numbers, they want them to be there because they see that as an insurance against more violence. They understand that, they welcome it. So, but if the Americans bomb Afghan villages because they can't find a particular Talib and so forth, so on, that really hurts. Because these are innocent people, they have not done it, it's just what they do. Now, there are means to accomplish this thing. You don't have to do that because the American soldiers are very few, and the best thing is to call an F-16 to bomb this village, and off it goes. And the idea would be that they have threatened us, and so consequently we have the means. That is not an effective policy. It depends what they do. And as far as the police situation is concerned, is that the police was not invested in much until 2007. So consequently, these were these dudes from various groups and they put a hat on and then they call them a police. They became the exploiters of the system. The fundamental problem in Afghanistan is that there is not enough talented people to administer these sort of phenomena. So they subcontract this thing to some warlord or to their brothers of the warlord, and they go on. That's a different kind of a combination. So the police, if it comes up right, I think things would be working. And my advocacy will be that recruit most of the police from these high school kids and the university. You will have an educated police force and at least understands how to report, rather than having somebody so forth. So we have done it badly.
Mm-hmm. See, I have a couple of people. Yes, sir. And then you, and then you.
David Hamburg. I've had the privilege of working with Mrs. Ogata over a number of years and have a sense of her great, extraordinary capacity for leadership. And I think there's an opportunity right now, like today, you know, with respect to USAID, both the President and Secretary Clinton have indicated in a general way that they would like a bigger and better USAID. Most of us familiar with USAID at the moment are not wildly enthusiastic about the situation of recent years and see a lot of room for improvement. And the leadership now genuinely wants to change that. Unfortunately, there's been a long delay in appointing a new director. Someone was nominated yesterday, a young man who, let's hope for the best. It seems to me that the very sensible things that Japan is doing, very constructive, foresighted development efforts that have some history to them and evidently have considerable acceptance by the people of Afghanistan, that it would be a great opportunity if Japan were to be willing to take some leadership with the U.S. I mean, offer your mentorship, quite frankly, to the young man who presumably maybe will be confirmed by the Senate. God knows what the Senate will do these days, but we have, I think, good intentions, but not a lot of serious work in the government yet on this problem. Maybe I've missed it, but I'm arguing for a serious effort at Japan-U.S. collaboration in aid in Afghanistan, quite frankly, with Japan in the lead, at least in the initial phase.
Thank you. Why don't we get a couple of questions, 2 or 3 questions out, and then I'll ask for some comments because we're running up against the clock here. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Professor Curtis. You already asked the question that I really wanted to ask, but then I have many questions to ask. So I'll ask another one, which is, I can understand how, oh, sorry. My name is Akbar Noman. I'm here at the School of International Public Affairs and at Columbia and various other things. But anyway, the question is, I can understand why this call you make for thinking of it as a joint project, something to be done with Afghans, obviously makes eminent sense. And I can quite understand why in the Bush administration this would not have been done. I mean, you know, for all sorts of reasons. These guys messed up everything and they were so distracted with Iraq. The question is now, when looking forward, going ahead, I mean, why, and now that this country has kind of, you know, regained some kind of sensible leadership at the top, why can't we have, what's the constraints? What's stopping that from happening? And relatedly, the other question, which is, you know, what can the U.S. do, which is implicit in what you were saying, to give an unambiguous, credible commitment that is there? I mean, there's a lot of ambiguity at the moment whether that is there for the long term. But that is, as you say, very disastrous to have this sense of, you know, non-credibility of the United States as a long-term partner.
Thank you. Jeffrey?
I wonder, Jeff Sachs, I wonder if both of you could compare a development surge versus a military surge. The amount that we're talking about is $40 billion of increased spending right now. That is about $1,500 per Afghan. What if we did a development surge that said with that amount of funding, we'd actually address the needs of seeds and fertilizer and equipment and roads and clinics and schools, rather than this extraordinary expense of troops. I just wonder whether we might be able to win some longer-term results out of that.
Thank you. We'll get one or two, and then I'm going to... Okay, you've just succeeded. Go ahead. Here, you can use this mic. Identify yourself.
Hello, my name is Aruj. I'm from the permanent mission from Pakistan to the UN. And this question is in regards to Japan, what is your perspective that Japan's involvement in either Afghanistan from the perspective of, let's say, I'm sorry, what is the extent of Iranian and Indian involvement in Afghanistan with two facets in mind, and that is firstly Security Council Resolution 1390, which prohibits Iran from selling small arms and weapons ordnance to the Taliban, and secondly, Pakistan's concern that when coalition forces do in fact leave Afghanistan, the power balance in South Asia will be drastically changed. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Kanehira-san?
My name is Kanehira, working for Japanese TV, not NHK. I was so much moved to hear the Japanese TV and Afghan national TV revitalized by the contribution of the Japanese NHK. And I decided, after hearing your lecture, I asked my boss in Tokyo to persuade to do anything to help the 14th newly Afghan TV stations. Anyway, my question is, how will you describe the impact the Japanese government's possible decision to end the naval refueling mission in support of the war of Afghanistan? Thank you.
Okay, well, Sadako, why don't we start with you? And
the questions really brought, I know that, and I'm convinced that development assistance can do quite a bit. But I am not as optimistic as maybe some of you are to think that this can replace a country in considerable turmoil and insurgencies and military action needed. This combining them two is really what is most important, and combining at what point, at when. There's sometimes when military sweep is necessary before development can come. Sometimes development of assistance can back up these things. I think in Afghanistan both are necessary, but the degree and the scale of both, I think, is something that is very hard to determine. I mean, Japan is not a country that would be, never was using force in relation to Afghanistan. And so it's something that it never happened, and I don't think that's the way we'll go. Police, we're going to do more. Just this spring, there was an announcement that Japan would pay the salaries of all the Afghan police for 6 months. And I think this is going to be extended because police training, police effectiveness would be very important. But I don't think there is any thinking of sending peacekeeping forces. Also on this fueling in the ocean, this was really for the NATO forces. This does not really have direct relevance inside Afghanistan. And so AID is, we would like to work with them wherever they're there and it's possible. There is the announcement is that they will be sending a lot of agriculture specialists, some 400 to Afghanistan, but we haven't really come across or at the stage of consultation yet.
Dr. Nadiri?
Well, there are some very important questions that were asked, and let me take the USAID issue. I think they should invite the Japanese government and listen to them. The situation in Afghanistan is that it is a tribal society that has a social capital of its own. You will never know what the relationship of people are unless you are from that culture, and I'm sure that the same thing is true from other countries as well. So this classification of this and that and so forth, so on, which the bureaucracies of the West is doing, is missing the point. For example, They are saying, you know, we will go around Karzai and then help the local people so we aid them, you know, forget about this guy, this corrupt, so forth, so on. Well, they don't know that he comes from a very strong Papalzai tribe, and he's the head of it. Now, they control the passages in Kandahar, and no member of that tribe, they will love to get the money and all that sort of things, but they will not, at the end of the day, will betray him, because their survival depends on this guy. So this whole issue of, you know, we do this, we do that, and so forth, so on, is a fantasy that they do not know the fabric of local politics that goes on in Afghanistan. So I would be very much attuned to Afghanize things. Let the Afghans take the lead. Ask them, as Japan is doing in the case of police and so forth. If we had this police at 2002, right now we would have a good police. But nobody gave a darn to it. And when you students and people in the West think of it, when you talk about the government, you're talking about Mike Bloomberg's office. He has got police, he has got this, and he's got money, and he goes around, and he has to make sure this and that. This is not the case. In Afghanistan, it is a government in the making. It is slowly developing, so that has to be considered. The issue which Jeff raised, I think that there is a way of doing this. For example, if the proper training is put together for the police and the army for the next 5 years, and maybe some agreement should be reached with the Afghan government that, you know, we would like, unless something happens, that we move out. As you move out, take a percentage of the one that you are spending on military affairs to be invested in economic and social development. That in itself will have a program, and many other things will come up and so forth. As the issue of surge, one of the shortcomings of the present surge is the following, is that the State Department and many others are going around and hiring a lot of Americans who are expert in XYZ, that they go and help the Afghans. This is the exact model that the Soviets followed. So what they do, these guys go in the and sit in some ministry, and since everybody knows that he has got the dollars, you know, they will gravitate toward him, and that minister is going to be nothing. And this will accentuate the problems of the United States much more. Instead, what they should do, they should hire a great number of very qualified, in fact, in this university, we have 3 or 4 major surgeons on the faculty of this place from Afghanistan, you know. Hire these people. They will be loyal Americans. They will not, but nobody approaches them. But these people have to be on the Afghan side so that they can work out the problems with the people. So it is a matter of design and a matter of timing. The other one, which was about Iran, Pakistan, India, which was mentioned, the problem with this issue is that the Pakistanis are very, very nervous about India and for their security, and this is understandable that they may be. But if there is a bold political approach is adopted to give some reprieve from the Kashmir problem for Pakistan for a few years, so that India will not attack them or whatever else and so forth, so on, so that they can come to this grip, to really solve this problem for them. You cannot. Right now, many people say Pakistan is not a country. It is an army in search of a country. How long can you continue this thing? And how long can you have these nightmares of the kind? They have to come to grip with this, this phenomena. So the political leadership and design is also important. And I mentioned about the making Afghanistan a facilitating phenomena that everybody will participate. I think the time is...
Can I just add one thing
Sure,
on
please.
Pakistan? On Pakistan, there was, I think in the spring, I think it was April, when the World Bank Pakistan conference took place, and there was a lot of pledges for assistance, especially to the civilians. And I think there was more pledges than we had expected. I can't give you all the figures, but Japan has pledged, and it was really targeted to the civilian side of the Afghan, what shall I say, development. A lot of water, electricity was also, but I think the main idea was to try to address the rural and agriculture side of Afghanistan, of Pakistan as well. I don't exactly cannot give you the exact situation of the implementation, but there was that on the international side to make sure that Pakistan, the civilian side, development side, is also taken care of.
Thank you. Well, you know, when this institute was founded 60 years ago, its main function was to try to increase a dialogue between Americans and Japanese on bilateral issues and to improve mutual understanding about each country's culture and social structure and politics and so on. But I think tonight's session is very appropriate as the 60th anniversary culminating event, because the issues for the U.S. and Japan today, there are bilateral issues, to be certain, but the most crucial issues are not bilateral issues. They are issues like Afghanistan. They are issues like the environment, energy, lots of issues that you cannot solve bilaterally, but where the U.S. and Japan can do a lot. And you know, the suggestion that we should listen to the Japanese on questions how you build a civil society in Afghanistan, how you do a development program in Afghanistan. Unfortunately, very few Americans understand how important that is. But I think tonight's session was very important as sort of, for those of us who've been involved with the East Asian Institute for a very long time and hope to be involved for some time more to come and for the next generation, this is exactly the kind of issue that we need to focus on. How can we combine our strengths to try to deal with these terribly difficult and frankly very depressing issues? And I think we're so fortunate that this evening we've had two wonderful, dedicated individuals who are so deeply involved and so committed to trying to help Afghanistan deal with its problems and become a peaceful, prosperous country. We've all learned a great deal. We appreciate Sadako coming all the way from Japan, joining us this evening. Dr. Nadiri, I know you're leaving for Kabul in the morning, and he arranged this trip so that he could be here with us this evening. It's been a great event. We're going to go right next door for a short reception. Oh, she's pointing that way. Right next door for a reception when you can introduce yourself, say hello. So I'd like everyone to join me in expressing our deepest appreciation to our guests this evening.